Coming up on Chopper's Political Podcast.
I'm taking over this show. Come on, this is the Griffith takeover. Griffith's Political Podcast.
It's his show now. Right, okay. Welcome back to Chopper's Political Podcast, where I bring you the best guests, gossip and stories from GB News studio in the heart of Westminster. I'm Christopher Hope, GB News' political editor. Later, I'll be heading to the pub with Shadow Business Secretary Andrew Griffith to ask about his party's new plans to save our locals and ask him why he didn't do it when he had 14 years in government, as well as his worries about a trade war and how he thinks his leader, Kemi Badenoch, is doing. Because as the polls show us, the Tories and Labour appear to be losing ground to Nigel Farage's surging Reform UK party. I think, mark this week in your diaries. For me, it was the moment when Labour finally, maybe belatedly, turned their fire on Reform UK, perhaps recognising that Farage's army of supporters are a problem for them as much as the Conservatives. First, there was this question, which I would suggest was planted by the whips in the House of Commons at Prime Minister's questions, allowing Sir Keir Starmer to attack Farage personally without him being able to reply in the Commons.
The honourable member for Clacton says that his party is, and I quote, open to anything when it comes to changing our NHS and open to an insurance-based system. So can my right honourable friend confirm that under a Labour government, the NHS will be there for everyone when they need it, not having to worry about the bill?
Mr. Speaker, the NHS is the lifeblood of our country, and that's why we invested £25 billion at the budget, a record amount, and we're making it fit for the future through our plan for change. What a contrast with Reform, whose leader has said that those who can afford to pay should pay for our healthcare. Under Labour, the NHS will always be free at the point of use for anyone who needs it.
Then, when Farage was called for a question at PMQs by Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker, he was met with a barrage of noise from the Labour benches.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. There appears to be some panic on that side of the House. I'm not surprised. To ask the Prime Minister, I'd like some advice, please. What do I say? Oh, they really are panicking, aren't they?
All that came as a group of Labour MPs from Red Wall seats wrote a letter to Keir Starmer urging him to do more to tackle immigration, the issue which drives so many to Farage's Reform UK. With me now to discuss all this is Joe White, the Labour MP for Bassett Law and the chair of the Red Wall caucus of Red Wall Labour MPs. Joe, welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast.
I'm very pleased to be here.
It's great to have you here. Thank you. Is Reform UK a worry for Labour?
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
The biggest challenge we've had, I think, since getting into power in last year. And personally, I'm up for it. Brexit was a big issue in my constituency. It's always been a Brexit voting constituency. And so I know that there's a strong voice there. Very concerned. I think the biggest issue is this sense of being left behind, not listened to by government. So people like me, I have a job to do in terms of delivery. My job is to regain their trust and their faith. I feel that they lent me their vote in July last year. And the challenge of government is to be listening to my people and ensuring that delivery happens in constituencies like mine. And this is why we created the Red Wall group.
Yeah, how many are in the Red Wall caucus?
There's about 40 of us now, so it's quite big.
Defined by what is the Red Wall to you?
So we've been quite clear about who we are. So I define it as post-industrial, where we had a huge manufacturing industry. Ex-mining is in mine. Areas that those are closed, and as they closed, what defined those areas was the strong trade union organisation. So as they left the pit gate at the end of work. They're given their leaflet and off they went, and they went to voted Labour, took their family to vote Labour. And that connection to vote Labour died with those industries because the trade unions left. And so the demographics have changed. There's no natural commitment to voting Labour. So when, the voice of change was Brexit, and so people voted Conservative very happily in 2019.
Because of Brexit?
Because of Brexit, believing that this would get the investment in areas like mine and they would actually physically have a...
They believed levelling up, the idea was pushed by Boris Johnson, didn't they?
They believed it. And then, it didn't happen. So my view is that they've lent me their vote in last year. And my job is to pressure government to make sure that they focus on areas like ours, the bread wall seats, and push for increasing skills and opportunities, the investment that we need, improving in infrastructure, and tackling our health issues. And that tangible change is so, so important. And they won't vote Labour next time if they don't sense that delivery.
You've got a chance, haven't you? But
Yes.
it's about delivery, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
And that's understood, you think, by the centre of the government? I mean, the government's had a lot on its plate. Just being in government, frankly, after 14 years not in government is a challenge, of course.
Yeah, so the letter that went to Keir last week, the main focus was on delivery.
In The Guardian, have a front page here saying Labour MPs tell Starmer to get tougher on immigration. Were you a signatory to this?
No, not that particular attempt. No.
But you agree with the sentiment, do you?
I certainly very much agree with the sentiment. Immigration, legal immigration is the issue that comes up most on the doorstep.
Legal, not illegal. That's understood. Interesting. Because the Tory, back in the Tory administration, they were focusing on illegal.
It's illegal.
And I was saying to them all the time, what about illegal? I mean, illegal is a symptom, but it's like 40,000 a year. Legal migration is nearly 1 million.
Yes. And that's symptomatic of the fact that people in my area are not given the opportunity to train and have the skills base that we need to get to higher paid jobs.
Yeah.
And so we've had to bring people in from abroad to fill those gaps. And also low pay is an issue. So you earn more money by working in Sainsbury's than working in the local care home. So the care home owners have had to bring in people from abroad to fill those vacancies. And that's wrong.
That's wrong, isn't it?
Yes. And that's one of the reasons that we have pushed to increase minimum wage and the living wage. So
which started in a budget.
Yes, exactly.
So you welcomed that.
Oh, very much so.
That's made a big difference, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So in April, that rates will go up, and that will be more money going into the local community. But it's more than that. We have to professionalise the care service. So I welcome the inquiry that's going to be led by Louise Casey so that we can actually improve the service and it's a better working environment.
When it starts.
Yes, exactly. When it starts.
Do you ever the language of the government when the things are called far right sometimes and they aren't far right? Or do you think they are far right? The concerns about the rape gangs?
I don't think they're far right. I think that they are valuable concerns. What happened in Rotherham is next door to my constituency. And the patterns of behaviour are being repeated across the country. And whilst it's absolutely imperative that we implement the 19 recommendations of the J
report in 2022.
Yeah, exactly.
Like 4 so far we know being there's 22, 4 so far being.
Yes, and there's a commitment there to implement all of them. That will begin the change. And what's important is that we listen to and we value the voices of the people who have been abused and those the survivors. And we respond to their calls and we do what they want. And so I think where it's continuing to happen, there has to be inquiries. And there is a model, we call it the Telford model, where the inquiry is victim-led.
Yeah.
And they're very much involved in who's interviewed, in terms of examining where it went wrong. But then we come back, the judge goes back to them every 2 years to make sure that the proposals that we made are actually implemented. Changes happening.
Is that enough? We've done some reporting in GB News. We think there are 50 towns where it's an issue. Should there be? I know she's scoping, isn't she? And doing an audit of where it is. Should there be a national inquiry? And that's.
I feel the localised inquiries are much more focused, and where they need to happen, they should happen. If there's 50 towns, if a scoping report finds that, an inquiry in each town, because
each town.
but we need to know where it's happened, why the reporting mechanisms are broken down, who's covering up, and everybody's involved should be imprisoned. If they're not reporting it, that the law will be changed and make it imprisonable or an offence for you not to report.
Why are authorities so nervous about getting involved in this? They seem to turn a blind eye. The police, authorities, councils, we're seeing it elsewhere, aren't we? And that's why it seemed to be...
What came out with the Rotherham's inquiries, that there's a fear of that people being accused of being racist. And I think the child comes first.
Always.
The victim comes first. And people have to get over that. I find it quite shocking. People were scared of rocking the boat. And I'm hoping that the inquiry has actually changed the parameters, and people understand they have a duty now to report. I think
that's one of they are doing that in law, aren't they?
Yeah,
shortly.
Exactly. Even if they suspect that something's going wrong, they should report so that there's a proper investigation.
On immigration, the reporting in the newspapers talk about Labour being bolder about showing how it's tackling immigration. Two areas there. There's the illegal migration. There's return flights. 16,000, I think.
Nearly 17 now.
That's doing quite well. That's ticking up. That's a good news story for Labour.
Yeah, we're not telling it loud enough. That's my concern.
Be louder, be braver.
Yes, that's what my ask of government. We've got to shout it that this is what we're doing. I'd like to see a filming of an aeroplane taking off so that everybody can see that it's happening.
We'd like to film it too at GB News.
I'd love you to.
We're making all that.
Yes.
But be bolder,
yes.
Be braver, and not feel about offending sentiment. Say, look, if you arrive here illegally, you are jumping the queue. You're not, you're arriving here illegally.
And we're bringing a new borders bill in on Monday, which is actually making it toughens the power. We've got a border control commander, Martin Hewitt. That should be the name on everybody's lips. It's going to give him much stronger powers to manage our borders. But also we're going to make it an offence to help anybody who assists those boats coming across. They will be in prison. We'll track them down and we will imprison them.
And we'll be covering that in detail on Monday. Net migration is legal migration.
Yes.
But, I mean, just for nearly 900,000 arriving in the last calendar year is a huge number of people under the Tory government.
Yep.
The Boris wave, that's what's been called, and rightly so, I think.
Yeah.
People look there at the housing crisis, the commitment by your government to create 1.5 million new homes, fantastic.
Yeah.
But that's all soaked up by new arrivals forecast over the next 5 years. I mean, that's the...
Yeah.
Based on current policies, and those trade policies can change.
Yeah. And what our government is saying is a points-based system.
Yeah.
So there are skills gaps, and we have to, in order for this country to function, we have to fill them. But
homes, you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. But our job is to train up local people to fill those gaps. And
start to a minimum wage. That helps.
Exactly, minimum wage. But also, for example, we need more nurses, we need more GPs, we need more technicians working in our hospitals. They have to be sourced locally. And in my area, I've actually set up a skills hub so that we can train nurses in Bassett law to work in the local hospital. So we don't have to look even further beyond our own borders in order to...
Do you want bold language? I mean, an immigration cap, and that was... No, I say that.
But that's been used by the
it didn't
government.
Work.
It didn't work.
It works if you mean it.
Yeah.
So if you look at the robust governing in America, I mean, Trump, for all his weaknesses and lots of weaknesses, he sort of does try and kick the system to make it work for him. And maybe that's what we need, a bit more boldness from the government here, Bon, to say, right, here's the cap, let's hit that. That's what Reform UK is saying. They are saying there'll be net migration. So if 500,000 arrive, 500,000 leave. Now, I say to them, that's not going to work because you have to allow a bit of flex for shortages.
Exactly.
But what you're up against, though, is a party saying net zero migration. Are you doing enough to take that on?
But when I talk to people on the doorstep, they recognise that we need people coming here where there are gaps. But as I said, it's points-based. It's short-term visas until we...
Families can't come.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's where we need those people, they come short term, and the ambition of our country is to fill those gaps ourselves.
Yeah. Offshore processing, are you in favour of that? It's been not deporting, which is around processing.
Yes, it has been, I've talked about it. It potentially is a long-term answer. Why do people come across from France to here? We're just as safe as France
We
is.
give them a hotel room, we give them some spending money. I mean, you don't make it difficult to arrive when they get here.
Yeah, but I think what we first need to do is toughen the borders ourselves, make it impossible to cross the seas using those boats. That's the first task.
Jo, you're a champion for Barcelona, a champion for the Red Wall, and that's to be applauded. Do you think the centre get your concerns? Should there be a minister for the Red Wall?
Oh, gosh, that's not something I've really thought about yet. There should certainly be a much stronger voice in government for the Red Wall.
How do you make that happen then?
At the moment, we're a strong lobby group. There's a big problem I call it an electoral deficit because Labour have been out of power for so long. There's nobody really in government from seats like ours. We've got obviously Yvette and Ed Miliband, but there's nobody really being put into government from seats like ours, even in the lower rungs.
I've noticed that.
Yes, and so at the moment there's silence, which is one of the reasons why we created our group to push and be a voice. So we're actually meeting with ministers on a regular basis in order to feed into policy development. For example, we met with Liz Kendall while she's developing the bill that's just gone through on benefit fraud. And we fed in our concerns about what we've seen on the streets and what we hear about.
It's really annoying, isn't it? People are ripping off the benefits.
I find it horrific. And when I knock, again, it's conversations on the doorstep. People point to people down the street, say, I work hard all my life, I pay my taxes, and yet look at them. They live the life of Riley and nothing's been done. So I got up in Parliament on Monday and spoke loudly and clearly in favour of that bill. We have to clamp down on the fraudsters. And it's not fair that we're paying taxes.
It's a fairness thing. That goes back to the heart of the illegal migration, I think.
Exactly.
But so do you want to have a voice in the cabinet?
Oh my God.
Not you personally, just a Red Wall.
Or Red Wall voice.
I have to support you in the cabinet.
No.
A Red Wall voice, I'm more of a northern voice. I mean,
yes, I do. I most definitely do. If and when there's a reshuffle, yes, I'd be loudly cheering for a strong voice from.
But the budget I felt was quite southern focused. Or the announcements, from Rachel Reeves last week, Oxbridge rail line.
She went for the low hanging fruit.
Yeah, but she didn't really. I think the north was a bit ignored. I think.
I agree.
You're nodding. Yeah,
I agree. And there was a level of anger from my Red Wall colleagues. And my challenge to Rachel is do that speech again in the north, telling our story, because by telling a story, you're actually attracting inward investment and you're attracting new businesses. So come to the north, please, Rachel. You are Leeds MP.
Correct.
Tell our story, and we have a good one, and where we want to invest and where we want to get the new skills, and I'll be clapping loudly from the sidelines.
Jo White, it's been great to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining us. Will you come on again?
I'd love to. Thank you.
Jo White, thank you. Now, it's the weekend, and for many of us, it's time for a pint to ease ourselves into it. But increasingly, pubs are hard to find, with a steady rate of closures over the past 2 decades. They were once the soul of British culture. It's where you go to meet up with your friends, enjoy a nice day with the family, drown your sorrows and mark your victories. But for how much longer, and what can be done about it? This week, the Shadow Business and Trade Secretary Andrew Griffith will launch a campaign to save the British pub, and he's with me now. Andrew Griffith, welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast.
To be here.
I can hear listeners screaming at their devices, however they listen to this podcast, saying, why didn't you do more to save the pub in 14 years in power?
Well, one thing, look, I mean, one can always look backwards, but one thing we never did was have this absolute triple whammy of the employment law regulations that are going to prevent things like seasonal working, flexible working contracts, even when the worker wants that. the real barrage of attacks that we saw in Rachel Reeves's budget.
Minimum wage isn't helping.
Minimum wage being up,
Rates
but also the real damage about the threshold that many people in the pub industry have asked her to delay at least the implementation of that threshold, which you pay national insurance. So don't want to get too technical, but they're reducing it from over 9,000 to about 5,000, bringing so many more workers, typically those people that might work, 20 hours a week or something in a pub, into national insurance for the first time, as well as putting up the rates. And then the reduction in the rate of retail hospitality and leisure relief. I should be very proud of what we did in government in terms of trying to help high street businesses recover with that real reduction in business rates. That's all going from April. The government's significantly reducing that level of relief. And what that is a real triple whammy for our local. And I know, representing a rural constituency, just how important your local is to the community. It is exactly as you say where you meet.
What's your local?
Oh, I've got too many. You're not allowed to choose a favourite child. I've fallen for this before, but there are lots of wonderful pubs in my constituency. I even did a pub guide, Chris. So when I was first elected, I wrote a pub guide about all the brilliant pubs in South Downs. Please, listeners, come along down.
Are you a fan of Wetherspoons?
I'm a fan of all pubs. It's they all have.
They're very political. It's a podcast. You can say Wetherspoons.
I'm a fan of all of them. I mean, I'm a fan of a lot of what Tim says. He's been a great champion. Jim Martin, he's been a great champion for the sector, a proper British entrepreneur and wealth creator. But I'm equally a fan of those, even community-owned pubs. One of the tragic things this government has done is stop the community ownership fund. So one of the last resorts for a community facing the loss of their pub was to put in a bid to the community ownership fund. Lots of communities did that. It meant they could take control of their own local pub. It's a hard business running a pub. I mean, it really is a hard business. You've got all of the property taxes, you've got all of the employment taxes, a lot of the red tape.
But CAMRA, the campaign for Real Ale, said around 1,200 pubs shut last year, 1,000 in 2023, 800 in 2022. On the Tory watch, so you were in power then? You didn't do it then to help them?
Well, as I say, we certainly didn't do. I'm not going to sit here and go like every single thing that we could have done in the past. And I've always been. Someone came from business. Chris. I've always been anxious about the level of red tape. Very conscious of the tax burden that we put on businesses because it is private businesses, archetypal businesses like local pubs that create wealth and provide jobs in our economy.
Pubs are different to supermarkets, obviously, and other shops. They have a kind of they're the heartbeat of a community, aren't they? They're almost, in any community, the post office, doctor's surgery, and a pub are the three legs of a stool which support that community. Is it time to give more protections to pubs in the same way we do protect post offices from closure, and we do protect maybe schools and GP surgeries from closure?
Well, the first thing that the government could do is stop whacking publicans round the head with a piece of 4x4, metaphorically, and that is exactly what they've done in the budget. If you think about all the different choices, even a government that wants to raise more money to spend on the unproductive public sector could have made different choices.
How about protection?
And the choices they've made uniquely whacked pubs and small businesses.
But moving on to polling, this week Reform UK at 25 points, Labour 24 points, Tories 21 points. That's YouGov. Last week, Find Out Now, another pollster, had a bigger lead for Reform UK. Do you worry about it? Are you not doing the right? Why are you not connecting with voters, or are they still not forgiving you for the election last year?
You always sort of worry about polling on one level. There's only two sorts of voters in my book. There's either Conservative voters or potential Conservative voters, and whether they went to sit on their sofa in July or whether they went to the Lib Dems or Reform, it's a competitive market, and we, led by Kemi, have got a good job to do to try and build that back. And if you're trying to build a new edifice, you've got to do that on firm foundations. A lot of things are going well. Shadow Cabinet is working well together. We are discussing policy again. We're united.
But no one's listening. It's not working yet.
Well, I think people.
The show is not working.
Well, as I say, I mean, I don't think you judge things by the spot numbers. Here we are, sort of all of 7 months in, less than an eighth of the likely period through this Parliament, 7/8 still to go. So I think you look at what are the KPIs, what are the key indicators of whether you're on the right path. Are we starting to look competent again? Are we united and working purposefully as a team? Are we up and atom? And I hope you think I am. Are we up and atom on social media and in the press and on the high street?
We certainly are.
Taking it to Labour. That's our job. And if we're competent at being the opposition, then we've got a chance of people saying, well, look, if they've done a decent job, they've got some new policies in place. We have a new policy announced this week about indefinite leave to remain.
On immigration,
a good reform that I think everyone who listens will herk up and say, "Hang on, that's a good policy."
Yeah, that's on legal migration. The first attempt at that. I mean, so the first policy, we had lots of principles there until now. Has that been a frustration that you haven't had any proper policies yet until now?
No, I think first of all, it's not the first policy. I don't want to be pedantic, but we have a policy of reversing Labour's, positively vindictive attack on private schools through changing VAT. Our policy is to reverse the attack on family farms and the family business death tax. So there's a couple of policies right there.
They're reactive, aren't they? They're reactive against the Labour policy.
I guess that's fair.
Like you're actually setting out your own stall.
That's fair. I wasn't trying to be a pedant. No. There are some other decisions and choices that we have said we would do differently. Indefinite leave to remain, which is a big challenge, and is one of the ways you reconcile a fairer immigration system with those who genuinely contribute to the society, high income, bringing unique skills to this country, which should be a pretty sparing, that's quite a high bar, should be deliberately a high bar, with the tail costs that even the ONS belatedly have started to calibrate of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds in terms of pension liabilities, the ongoing cost of social housing.
Did you think you need to say sorry more? I was talking to people around the way Keir Starmer approached his time following from Jeremy Corbyn. He spent 2 years apologising and then he got listened to. And I wonder whether you just haven't got to that point of apologising enough for the things that went wrong.
Look, it's not a great analogy, but as a parent, if something goes wrong, you want your child to say, sorry, look, I accept responsibility and I accept that there were things that I should have done differently.
Yes.
But sorry doesn't get you very far. What you actually then want to say is, well, what have you learnt? What are you going to do differently? And we see across the Atlantic right now, it's a really interesting time in politics, the benefit of having a clear plan and the people to execute it. And I'm quite excited, actually, Chris, about the opportunity over the next 36 months to be part of Kemi's team, putting a really clear set of plans. ILR is one example, but my goodness me, when we think about rewiring government, how do we make government more efficient? How do we put it back at the service of ordinary people? How do we make our democracy work?
So lessons from Trump then. I mean, do you want to have your own Department of Government Efficiency, Doge?
Well, a lot of us have been talking desperately about the desire to have government efficiency, to restore accountability.
Armour to cut red tape. How about that if Tories win?
Well, I think every department. I mean, I disagree. I disagree with Labour. Labour have come up with this idea that you have one department, which is the Office for Value for Taxpayers. Bloomin' hell. As minister, it was my responsibility in the areas I was responsible for to deliver value for money for taxpayers. So I want to be part of a team that goes in hard on day one of the next Conservative government, and every minister in that department does their rewiring, absolutely make sure that we have, frankly, a smaller, a more efficient, but a well looked after and well incentivised civil service. I've never criticised my individual civil servants, but I think the lack of performance management, for example, the lack of clear goals and targets makes it a very difficult environment.
Onto your brief, though, will we be worried about a trade war with America? Is that worrying you? Tariffs on products here? And what would it mean for the typical voter in the country?
Well, what it would mean is higher costs in their weekly shop. It would mean less job security.
So what goes up,
and it would mean our economy wouldn't grow, and then ultimately the public services that we like wouldn't get paid for.
So how will the shop change? What products might go up in value?
Look, not only do I not want to speculate, I mean, I think that's way ahead of our skis on that. There's an opposite strategy, which is rather than worry about what could happen, it's to work closely with our strongest ally, our major security partner in the world, and our closest single trading partner. And I have been very critical and will continue to do that the government, even in its body language, let alone disastrous ideas like giving away or paying to give away the Chagos Islands, I mean, that sends a huge bat signal that we are an unreliable ally, that we're not actually capable of making sensible decisions about our own affairs. And all of this sort of chat with European Union is never bad to talk. I'm never against talking to people. But the body language of just keep going backwards and forwards to Brussels and not putting decent boots on the ground in Washington with this new administration, it's all run.
I've always thought, I don't know why Labour isn't just embracing Brexit. I'm just saying, right, these are our powers. You know, even saying, look, the VAT on school fees is a Brexit dividend. You may not agree with it, but it's a Brexit dividend for some people, for the Labour government. I mean, we're outside the European Union. They've got a chance here to escape punitive tariffs.
It's just weird, isn't it? I mean, people they get elected to this great parliament of ours, and then there's a constituency that just simply wants to give away. I mean, trade policy was a real success of the last Conservative government, right? Of course, we didn't get everything right. There were lots of things I wasn't a fan of, even at the time. But trade, where we were able, for the first time in 43 years, to have an independent trade policy, none of the Remainer, moaning and fear-mongering ever came true. We got trade deals. Some were continuity, but there were a lot of new ones. And that's a great area for us.
Well, one topic no one's talking about is the impact on Northern Ireland. If there are tariffs on the EU, that affects Northern Ireland, does it? Have you followed this? It's important to Northern Ireland.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of complexities. There's a sweet spot for Northern Ireland, but could be
in both jurisdictions.
Having a foot in both camps, and as free traders, you can see the advantage of that. But yes, you're right. I mean, there's a real danger that we end up being somewhat of a collateral damage because in an EU-US spat. We had that before when we were in government. I worked with others to try and defuse some of the tensions when there was an Airbus-Boeing spat, and the UK ended up some sectors that are entirely blameless and benefited from free trade ended up being collateral damage. We can't afford to do that again, which is why people should be getting in the room and talking trade with Trump. I've said that time and time again. It is a frustration because they are our closest ally, and over time, even this government will come to realise that.
Just finally, Andrew Griffith, are you enjoying being opposition? A bit of a step back, rethink ideas? Look,
I am. You would not wish for this. One goes into this to try and, do public service because you think your country could be led better and deliver better for people.
But you can't be in power for 1,000 years. There are periods when you're out of power when you have to rethink it all and think of new ideas.
Exactly. And it's a target-rich environment. I mean, genuinely, look, when government does things right, so a lot of the work on city reforms, they are continuing work that Jeremy Hunt and I did. That's fine. That's good, right? Yeah. But when they do things wrong, and particularly the choices that they've made around the budget, the terrible employment bill, which is a back to the 1970s, authored by the trade union bill, and when they do these things, we will absolutely call them out. And, my phone is buzzing off the hook with businesses, really fearful about the damage that's going on. So am I enjoying it? Look, I enjoy being busy, Chris, and I'm definitely busy now because this government is doing a lot of things wrong and it's damaging.
And just finally, back to the polls, do you think a deal should be done with Reform UK? Can you see them off? As a protest party, which what Keir Starmer says they are, or should you do a deal with them? And some of their policies, of course, are pretty much Tory policies.
Control what you control is my maxim in life. And what we can control right now is, are we a competent opposition? Are we united? Are we coming forward with policies that speak to things that matter to people? And if we do all of those things, then our stock will rise and our poll position will improve. And there's a long way to run until the next election. I regret that because I'd love one tomorrow, but I don't think we're going to have
it. 6 months, you said there also. Andrew Griffiths, thank you for your time today. Thank you for joining us on Chopper's Political Podcast. Thanks again to Joe White for coming on the podcast earlier. Thank you too for listening wherever you are or watching this. I tweeted Christopher Hope on X. What do you tweet, Andrew?
Griffith A, I believe.
Griffith A.
Or backingbusiness.uk. There you go, okay. Backingbusiness.uk.
There we go.
Find what I'm up to.
Okay, and email me, chopper@gbnews.uk. If you enjoyed this show, Andrew Griffiths has, please tell your friends. He'll tell his friends. And if you really enjoyed it, please leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It helps other people to find this show. Thanks to the great team of GB News colleagues behind the podcast. Some of them are in the room right now. I can see over there George McMillan, Rebecca Nunes, also Mick Booker and Jeff Marsh. Most importantly of all, thank you to you for listening. If you want more Chopper in your life, and Andrew does, and who doesn't, catch me during the week on GB News. Keep up to date on our best reporting on politics on our website, gbnews.com. And I pop up virtually all the time talking about politics, trying to help explain it to you all. Until next time, I'm off to the pub with Andrew. Cheerio!